All right, welcome back. So we're going to go into chapter 13. So we've just talked about these nerves and the sensory information. So we've really been talking about going from a receptor at the peripheral parts of our bodies, either internally or externally, and now this information is going to the spinal cord, right, and then up to the brain. So let's actually now talk about how it gets into the spinal cord, up to the brain, and then how it gets from the brain down out to like muscles, right? So we're going to talk about some of these different tracks. So some of the things that we're going to talk about are spinal cord reflexes, how this information is actually integrated. So you're going to have inhibitory and excitatory nerve impulses, and basically if the response is, okay, do it, you will do it. And I guess what I'm trying to say there is sort of like you may have had a situation where, I don't know, let me think of this. Give you a hypothetical situation where, let's say, you go to pick up a pot, right, and it's really hot, and your instinct is to drop it, right? But you can't just drop it right there on the floor because maybe your dog or your kid is right there and you scald them. So you have to inhibit that same signal as saying drop, saying no, and so the sum of what's going to happen is going to be that basically the sum of inhibitory versus excitatory, and you're saying put the pot down over the stove real fast, and then, put your hand in ice water or something. Hopefully that makes sense. Right, and really our spinal cord is going to be this highway of upward and downward travel of sensory motor information. So basically sensory information is going to go up, because it's all that information that you're sensing is going to go up to the brain, so the brain can process it. And then motor output, so this pot is hot, that's information is going up to your brain. And then your brain's going to go, okay, well, you put it over there, or drop it, or whatever. It's going to send that information down to your muscle saying, let go. Okay? So it's kind of how it works. You sense it, then you do something about it. All right. So with that, I'm going to hide me here so you get a better look. So here's our spinal cord, and just like your brain was protected by the different meninges, right? If you remember the dura mater, the pia mater, and then the arachnoid mater, right? So you have the same exact layers. In this image, the dura mater and the arachnoid mater are basically right on top of one another. When you actually take in cadavers, when you actually take the dura mater off, kind of like or cut something like this, basically the arachnoid mater is so spiderwebby thin that it simply just peels away from the pia mater and sticks to the dura mater. So that's why you see those two kind of lumped together. Okay. So in dura mater, arachnoid mater, there's going to be a little space, that's the subarachnoid space, and then the pia mater is right on the surface of the spinal cord itself, just like we saw with the brain. So we're going to have cerebral spinal fluid that's going to be in this subarachnoid space. There's also going to be something called the central canal in the middle of the spinal cord that'll also contain cerebral spinal fluid. And then there's lots of different ligaments. You don't need to worry about their names, but there's lots of different ligaments that are going to kind of secure and anchor your spinal cord in that dura mater, in that cerebral spinal fluid, so it doesn't just kind of bounce around in there. All right. So I found the video of a spinal tap procedure. So this is more of one of those that if you want to take a look at it, go right ahead. So when we do a cerebral spinal tap, spinal tap, what they're going to do is they're going to take cerebral spinal fluid from that subarachnoid space. So what they're going to have the person do, and you'll see this in the video, is they'll have them sit, or sometimes they're laying down on their side, and they'll kind of like go into like a fetal position if they're laying on their side, and that stretches out the vertebra in their lower back, and that's usually where they're going to tap them. So take a look at this video if you like, and see what it actually is. And so really, procedure, you can diagnose pathologies, see if there's anything found in that cerebral spinal fluid, or if there's any kind of chemical imbalance or something like that. Sometimes you may have to put antibiotics in that area. Sometimes you're trying to put dyes or anesthetics, or chemotherapeutic drugs, for chemotherapy, right, depending on if you have a tumor somewhere. So anyway, spinal taps can be done for many different reasons. So if you take a look at this image, you'll see that here are the last three thoracic vertebrae, T10, T11, T12, and then we're at lumbar and then sacral. So the spinal cord, right, is basically you go from the cortex down to the pons, down to the medulla, and then from that medulla you go into the spinal cord. And then right around your T12 vertebra, it stops, right? So I know here it says about the second lumbar, so that's about the last ish, where the tip of that spinal cord is, right? So it kind of tapers to an end. We'll see what that's called in a second. Basically, what ends up happening is that you continue to grow, your spinal cord does not. So your spinal cord stops growing at a certain age, and then afterwards it simply sends down all these different nerves, well, I guess they're containing axons, down to your lower body and to this lower pelvic area. On that spinal cord, you'll see enlargements in the spinal cord. So let's say we took a lumbar, so this lower back part of this, in the cervical area, spinal cord, we'll actually see that down here, and they call these lumbar enlargements even though we're in the thoracic area. I know, it's kind of weird. But basically in here, you actually, it's not a straight line. I'm sorry, I'm not explaining this very well. So if we take a look at our spinal cord, it's not just a simple straight line like that, right, as straight a line as I can draw. So it's not that. What you actually see is in the cervical area, it bulges out, it tapers in, and then right at that lumbar area, it'll bulge out before it goes into that cone. So it kind of comes back out, it bulges. And then we go up to the cervical area, it'll come out and it'll bulge again. It's actually what your spinal cord looks like. And basically what's going on here with these bulges is that you have all these nerves coming from your legs into your spinal cord, well, in and out. And the same idea here up in the cervical area, you have lots of nerves going in and out from your arms. So the spinal cord actually gets a little bit wider there. So that's what that is. So this point where it comes to this sort of cone-like end is simply called the conus medullaris. That's what that is. In this area, well, I guess throughout the spinal cord really, you'll have what's known as the filum terminal. These are little extensions of that pia mater coming right off the spinal cord, and they're going to help stabilize the spinal cord in the canal, so again, so it's not kind of moving around. That plus those ligaments will help with that. And then the rest of this, where all of these nerves are coming down, right, all of this, you can imagine that sort of like a ponytail, like you know, someone puts their hair back. So that all of this right here, that's called the cauda equina, the horse's tail. Okay, so those are those lowest spinal nerves bundled together. It's called the cauda equina. So here are our spinal nerves. So we have 8 pairs of cervical, 12 thoracic, 5 lumbar, 5 sacral, and 1 coccygeal nerves. So if you take a look, we have one extra cervical nerve versus cervical vertebra, simply because it starts above the atlas and then below it as well. So you have one extra one. Otherwise, it's the same number as we have vertebra, right? These are going to contain sensory as well as motor nerves. So when we look at these nerves coming out of our spinal cord, right, any of these, they're going to be a mixed bag, or I should say more like a 2-lane highway, maybe, sort of like the 60, you go east and west, right? So it's basically 2-lane highway. So some of that information is coming in, some of that information is going out. We'll take a better look at this in a second. Hopefully that'll make more sense. So here's your spinal cord, right? And then you can see that some of this information in blue, that's incoming information, and that'll make a connection with outgoing information, as well as we'll see in a little bit other connections that'll go up to the brain. So you can see here outside the spinal cord, they blend together and they form a single nerve. So again, both incoming and outgoing information.